Hey, I'm Blair Best. It's Wednesday here on The Story, and tonight, an update on Oregon's public defense crisis, why a Marion County public defense firm is now suing the state's Public Defense Commission over a contract they argue violates the state constitution. Plus, some of the most outspoken critics of a Northwest Portland homeless shelter now changing their tune. But first, a federal judge extends the restraining order blocking the National Guard from deploying to Portland, but there's a catch. And it's our big story tonight. More on that in just a moment. But first, we want to give you a look at the scene at the ICE building within the past 90 minutes or so. Around a dozen people there, several wearing costumes. Portland police tell us they did not arrest anyone there last night. They have arrested 50 people related to the nightly protests since June. The feds also did not make any arrests last night, but did give someone a federal citation. The feds have either arrested or cited 195 people since June, though just 34 of those arrests actually led to federal charges. Kyle Boshi joins me now. Okay, Kyle, walk us through the federal court developments from today and what we're still waiting on.
So there was an important hearing by phone today. Judge Karen Immerget basically extended her temporary restraining order for 2 weeks, temporarily blocking the National Guard from being deployed in Portland. She'd said this earlier, it was due to expire, and so she said, let's continue this out. This really sets the stage for what's to come next, and that's the Ninth Circuit and a ruling from the Ninth Circuit. We're waiting for that. You'll recall last week, the three-judge panel heard oral arguments in the case, considering whether to overturn Judge Immerget's ruling. We're waiting to see what happens there. Ultimately, if they say that temporary restraining order should be dissolved, that would clear the way for the National Guard to come into Portland.
Okay, and Kyle, that Ninth Circuit Court ruling could still come at any time?
Exactly. That's the big question. It's anyone's guess when we'll get a ruling. I talked to a law professor today who said, just be patient, everyone. Obviously, these judges are taking it very seriously. They want to get it right. Here's a portion of what she had to say today.
Just like with trials, the Ninth Circuit, now obviously sometimes they have to issue a quick order, but normally it's very stately and everyone sort of thinks about it and takes their time. So there's tremendous pressure on this three-judge panel to get a decision out, and not just a yes or no, but of course a written decision. And if there is going to be a dissent, in other words, if all three judges on that panel do not agree, then there's going to be a majority and a dissent.
So, Kyle, this upcoming ruling from the Court of Appeals is still only looking at that temporary measure blocking the Guard's deployment. What do we know about the trial itself and the case as a whole? Right.
So also during today's hearing, Judge Immerget kind of laid the groundwork for this trial. It's fast-tracked, moving very quickly, set for October 29th. It's a 3-day trial. Essentially, the parties will dispute two issues. One, whether President Trump had the authority to deploy the National Guard. And then secondly, if he's infringing on state sovereignty in doing so. Those are the issues they're going to be tackling. And we focus so much on the temporary restraining orders, which are important. Those are temporary, though. The trial is the big one. So all eyes will be focused there in the weeks to come. Things are moving very quickly, though.
Okay, Kyle Boshi, staying on top of it for us tonight. And of course, as this story continues to develop, KGW will be there every step of the way. Download the KGW News app so you can get real-time alerts right to your phone. And be sure to check out our TV app, KGW Plus, or the KGW YouTube channel. Well, tonight, we're checking in on Oregon's public defense crisis. Back in April, Governor Tina Kotek fired the head of the Oregon Public Defense Commission. That's the agency in charge of the state's contracts with public defense firms. Kotek then installed a new director, Ken Sanchagrin, there he is, with the clear expectation he would come up with a plan to reduce and eventually eliminate Oregon's backlog of unrepresented criminal defendants. Okay, as of today, there are still more than 3,000 criminal defendants without an attorney in Oregon, and most of them are not in custody. It's worth noting, though, the number of people without representation is trending in the right direction, because back in the spring, it topped 4,000. Sanchagrin delivered his 12-month plan to the governor in June. Much of it depended on a new contract his office was working on for public defense firms to sign. That new contract began in October 1st. But one public defense firm in Marion County has refused to sign it, even going a step further and suing the Oregon Public Defense Commission, or OPDC. They argue the new contract is unconstitutional and that it will require their attorneys to take more cases than they can ethically handle. Shannon Wilson is the executive director of Public Defender of Marion County. They said the contract they were handed by the OPDC would force them to cut positions right off the bat.
In that contract that was proposed, they had already removed 5 positions from that contract. Yeah, so they already removed their intention was to remove public defenders from Marion County.
At a time where there still are unrepresented people and not enough public defenders to represent those people.
Okay, that last person you just heard from is Josh Krumholtz, an attorney representing Wilson in their battle with the state. Now, the job cuts are certainly a problem for Wilson, but they aren't the problem at the heart of the lawsuit. That has to do with the number of cases each public defender is expected to take. Since 2021, Oregon has used something called the Maximum Attorney Caseload Standard, or MAC. It's exactly what it sounds like, a framework for the maximum number of cases a public defender can ethically take on, with cases weighted by type. Criminal attorneys we've talked to on both sides of the courtroom are ambivalent about the MAC, with most telling us it's imperfect at best. But under this new contract, Wilson says the state has subtly changed what the MAC means. It's still the standard, but now it's not a ceiling for the number of cases public defenders take on. It's become the floor.
So it's a quota system. It's a mandated caseload that's imposed on every lawyer. And in this quota system, the contracts weren't necessarily based in anything that was like, it wasn't based in the realities of the work. So it imagines, one problem is that it imagines that an attorney that starts a contract has no clients, right, doesn't already have a full caseload, and then would be required to take on a certain number of additional cases within that year. And so it just turned the contract into just a sheer number standard. Essentially, each year, a public defender with an already full caseload is required to pick up an additional equivalent of 300 misdemeanors mandated.
Now, as the director of a public defender office, Wilson says the contract takes away their ability to manage workloads among attorneys. Right now, everyone is supposed to take a MAC load of cases each year, regardless of what's going on with their cases or their personal lives.
A good example of what public defenders are forced to do under this contract is, on average, they would only have allotted to them 5.25 hours to handle a misdemeanor case. They need to have the ability to investigate the claims, interview witnesses, meet their client and interview their client, look at discovery, look at body cams. The 5 hours runs out in the blink of an eye. So the consequence is that the public defenders are forced to take whatever deal is on the table and just get the best deal that they can get without even knowing whether it's the right deal for that client, because they're just denied the opportunity to do their job.
They're arguing the new contract from OPDC violates the Oregon Constitution and state law by forcing lawyers to act unethically.
We're asking the court to render that ruling, that a contract that requires this number of cases that's set at the MAC level is unenforceable as a matter of law because it violates the Constitution and because it requires lawyers to handle more cases than they're capable of handling, and rendering it a violation of our own ethical rules.
Okay, so what does all this mean and why does it matter? Well, the goal of this lawsuit is not just about getting a new contract from OPDC. They want a ruling to force the state to use a new caseload standard, replacing the MAC entirely, basically upending how the state plans to eliminate the unrepresented defendant backlog, throwing a whole new wrench into this crisis. And it's not outside the realm of possibility. Under the previous director, the OPDC actually already adopted a caseload standard that public defenders like Wilson have been pushing for. But despite adopting it, the state is not using it. The Washington State Supreme Court has been leading an effort to create a more ethical caseload standard for public defenders. Their new model takes effect in January, although it's somewhat of a soft launch because it won't be fully in effect for another decade. And Oregon originally moved to the MAC standard, following in Washington's footsteps. But as our northern neighbor leaves the MAC behind, Wilson and Krumholtz hope their lawsuit could help Oregon do the same.
It is the state Supreme Court that ultimately has the responsibility of making sure that justice is applied equally and fairly. It is the state Supreme Court that is responsible for making sure that the rules of ethics are being followed. The legislature doesn't decide either one of those things. So yes, it's our belief that the legal community as a whole, and the Supreme Court in particular, has a responsibility of determining what constitutes constitutional and ethical behavior in their courts.
We wanted to talk to the Oregon Public Defense Commission about all this, but they said they can't comment on pending litigation. Right now, Public Defender of Marion County is still working on its cases from the previous contract, but they are not getting assigned new ones. They're trying to work out some kind of agreement with OPDC in the meantime. A first hearing on the lawsuit is scheduled for Friday in Marion County Circuit Court, and we will keep you posted. So talk to us. What do you think about this latest twist in the public defense crisis? We know it's a little dense at times, but obviously critically important rather, to our state's justice system. Email us the story at kgw.com or call and leave us a voicemail, 503-226-5090. Well, 6 weeks ago, a new homeless shelter opened in the Pearl District in Portland amid major pushback from neighbors. But now, some of its most outspoken critics are cautiously changing their tune. Catherine Cook explains.
A lot can happen in 6 weeks. Take this low-barrier overnight shelter in the Pearl District. It opened exactly 6 weeks ago to a lot of fear and doubt from neighbors, especially Todd Zarnitz.
Everybody's just going to turn off the lights and we're going to see this destabilize the community, and that's a very real fear.
As president of the Northwest District Association, Zarnitz led the effort to prevent the shelter from opening. But 6 weeks later,
right now, I think things are going in a positive direction.
Fear and doubt have made way for cautious optimism.
I think right now we're seeing good things, and we want that to continue. So, I've been very critical from the get-go, and the city has, to our surprise, lived up to a lot of what they said they were going to do.
That includes increasing patrols in the area and promptly clearing any unsanctioned camps. The Salvation Army runs the shelter. They say participation peaked Monday night with 68 people. About 80% of participants are repeats, but they're also getting 2 to 3 new guests every night. And as the temperatures dip, they expect that number to grow. As far as crime, the city says the shelter hasn't reported any incidents since opening. Neighbors we talked with aren't surprised.
We were talking earlier, we were just playing with the dog with no worries, and we're right here at the building, so I think it's going great.
I thought it was a good idea in the first place. My hope is that it continues to house more people.
Right now, capacity at the shelter is 100, but can expand to 200. Long-term, Zarnitz and the city hope those staying here can move on to something more stable, but they know it'll take more than 6 weeks.
Yeah, it took a long time to get here, and it's going to take a long time to get back. You know what I mean? Like, you just don't suddenly end up on the street, and you just don't suddenly end up back into society.
The city says right now overnight shelters are not equipped to take in kids, so at times they've had to turn away families. But in November, they tell us they'll be opening 3 new shelters just for families. Exact locations are not being shared, but we know one will be in Southeast and East Portland. And they'll be by referral only, not walk-up sites. Okay, coming up next on the story, we head back to the state of Idaho for an update on the U.S. Air Force partnership with the Middle Eastern country of Qatar. As questions swirl about what exactly that will look like, we have insight from a 500-page report that flew under the radar a few years ago. Plus, we're hearing from officials in the area for the first time. That's next, when the story returns. Okay, with this next story, it's a bit of a cliche in the world of journalism, but there are more questions than answers tonight in the case of the plan for a Qatari Air Force facility in the state of Idaho. One thing we do know is that Qatar will not have its own military base. The facilities they will build to house and train fighter pilots will remain under the control of the U.S. Air Force at the Mountain Home Base. It's about 50 miles southeast of Boise. But some of Idaho's state lawmakers want more information about what's going on. So 8 of them sent a letter to Idaho's congressional delegation in D.C. saying they are deeply concerned by the agreement with Qatar. Specifically, they write, the rise of radical Islamic terrorism remains a serious concern for many Americans. This agreement does little to ease those fears. On Tuesday, we heard from the mayor of Mountain Home for the first time about this, and he was asked if he knew the announcement from Secretary Hegseth was coming last Friday.
The wing commander called me and goes, "Hey, just letting you know, we found out too." So I think we were all shocked, I guess. Not shocked in the aspect that it's finally inked, but just the press release or the information wasn't laid down or put down to all of us in a more efficient manner. But I digress. Either way, it's fine. We're a big family-oriented place. Mountain Home is one of the most diverse communities in Idaho because of that Air Force Base. You've got every culture you can imagine from that Air Force Base. We've got our Basques, we've got our Hispanic community. We have everything you can think of in Mountain Home, and that makes us better. And this is no different than any other culture or country. We've been training all sorts of contingencies, from the Germans to the French to everybody out at that training base.
We also heard from a commander at the Air Force Base who said he expects the partnership with Qatar to be the same as existing foreign partnerships there.
We have a partnership with Singapore, and we join with them and we train daily with them, and we have some of the best airspace here in the country. And so it's exciting that the Singaporeans are here with us, and it's going to be equally as exciting when we get the Qataris here, just with those partnerships and working together and training. There's a lot of benefit, not only to the Qataris, but there's a lot of benefit to the men and women at Mountain Home Air Force Base across the base on just the training opportunities and stuff that we will have to embed with them and train with them and work with them. And I think we may not even see them until 2030. So there's still a lot of work to be done.
Both men confirmed that this plan did not happen overnight. This whole idea began back in 2017, when the first Trump administration approved the sale of $12 billion worth of American F-15 jets to Qatar. Then, in 2022, a 500-page report was published, which was mostly an environmental assessment of the partnership. The final finding, no significant impacts to the human or natural environment or surrounding communities. But apart from environmental concerns, the report also included details of the full project and mission. And let's be clear, nobody has confirmed what the current plan is. The government shutdown is affecting some of that right now. But let's look at some of the highlights from the 2022 report to give us an idea of what could be on the table now that this partnership is moving forward in our region. It would permanently integrated squadron controlled by the U.S. Air Force. Again, all of this is subject to change. But Qatar's military leadership did visit the Idaho base 2 years ago in March. The chief of staff of Qatar's armed forces toured the base. So, only time will tell what happens next. But there appears to be a blueprint for a major partnership with Qatar based in Idaho. Well, coming up next on the story, you've heard of the big one regarding the major earthquake that's projected to hit the Northwest. But a new theory from Oregon State researchers shows the potential impacts along the entire West Coast, which of course is bad news for emergency responders. Details when the story returns. Well, tomorrow is the International Shakeout, when millions of people around the world hold earthquake drills. And in Oregon, it coincides with OSU researchers making quite a discovery. The Cascadia subduction zone, about 75 miles off our coast, may be synchronized with another fault system in California, meaning the earthquake, known as the big one, could be even bigger. Libby Dowsett explains.
Many Californians are used to hearing about earthquakes.
It's going to happen when it happens. You know, they can predict the weather. They can't predict an earthquake.
Even Oregonians have heard warnings about the big one for years.
Ignorance is bliss.
So I'm not super concerned with it. I feel like I've heard that so many times and nothing's happened.
But a new theory from Oregon state researchers that two fault systems along the West Coast may be synchronized and could trigger each other has Portland emergency managers considering their own resilience plans.
Now that we know more about how it could also trigger potentially both large and small earthquakes along the coast down south, that could potentially have an impact of how and when and who gets here to help out.
Portland Resilience Officer Richard Nerwal says people need to stock up now with at least 2 weeks of supplies and get to know their neighbors because immediate help may be hard to find.
It's not city officials, it's not FEMA, it's not emergency managers. The first help you'll receive is likely from your neighbors.
After the dust settles from an earthquake, Portland has designated 50 sites around the city called Basic Emergency Earthquake Communication Nodes, also known as beacons. Volunteers will come here and set up communication centers. KGW's beacon site is right here at Lincoln High School's football field. Emergency managers say it's also important to build some muscle memory with drop, cover, and hold earthquake drills.
If you cannot find a table to get under, cover your head with something you can find. If you're walking out and if you have a laptop, use your laptop to cover your head.
Emergency coordinators at the state level say if the Cascadia subduction zone experiences a full rupture of 9.0 in the next 30 to 50 years,
it's going to affect Northern California, Oregon, Washington, British Columbia, Alaska, Hawaii. This is not like a crustal earthquake, which is 10 to 30 seconds. This is minutes long of slow rolling waves that are coming through.
So practice and preparation are the best ways to get through it.
Because we want people to survive and be healthy afterwards.
Well, the Great Oregon Shakeout is at 10:16 tomorrow morning. Okay, that's the end of our show, folks. Thanks so much for watching. The good stuff is coming your way next. And don't forget, everyone has a story to tell. Have a great Wednesday night. I'll see you right back here tomorrow night at 6:30.